Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's see. Okay, so now we go to YouTube Studio. Now we have to that. Now we go to content. Then we go to live. On. Okay. Okay, got some people. Okay, Peter, can you see me?
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, we are live. Very exciting. And we already have some gagglers waiting for us. Nigel Baird, London calling. Welcome, welcome. Nice to be in touch with London. And yeah, we have Roger, Michaud. I'm not quite sure where you are. And then you have Duby. Hello, guys. Hello to you. Hope everyone's well. And it's really very exciting. You know, we're here. You know, we're back on YouTube, and
being in the wilderness.
Recording is in progress. So we're now on live, and we're recording, and the technical sophistication is
bravo, George. Bravo.
Well, let's see. So how are you, Peter?
Very, very good. I'm still on vacation. Mm-hmm. Very happy to be doing this here. I've been. You and I have talked extensively over the last couple of weeks. We usually talk on a daily basis, but since I've had more time, we've talked more. There's been so much to talk about, and there's so much to push back against. And I hope YouTube doesn't frown upon us too much that we won't be able to do this again. But looking at the news narratives coming out of mainstream media, it's more than appalling.
Yes, yes. No, absolutely right. And you know, this drumbeat, this particular drumbeat for some sort of renewed engagement in Afghanistan seems absolutely bizarre.
Isn't it really interesting, George, is that, you know, you and I have talked about this mantra ever since we've known each other, and that's many years now. We've gotten, what is the default position? Something must be done. It's always that default. Something must be done. Right. And my default position is stop helping people.
Right,
stop doing it.
Right. I have to say, though, that the this apparent suicide bombing, we don't yet know exactly what happened at Kabul airport. But I think this would tend to only intensify the drumbeat. Hey, we can't leave with our tail between our legs. You know, we can't be driven out by suicide bombers. Of course, you know, we should leave precisely because there are suicide bombers, and it's a completely pointless venture. But I think it may lead to, again, the intensification of this shrieking. I mean, I can already hear Hannity postulating, my God, we can't possibly leave Kabul in the hands of these horrible suicide bombers.
Who is he giving so much time to? Oliver North, of all people, over the last two Hannity programs, or last three.
That's right.
What did Ollie North say? He's
Right.
talking about a counter-insurgency strategy. He said on 3 different occasions, I know something about that. Yeah, you sure do. It was called the Dirty War in Central America, you bastard. And you have a national platform, and then you go to CNN and MSNBC and Fox. All of the originators of this fiasco, they get airtime. None of them taking a hit. None of them.
I agree, and it is an extraordinary thing. I mean, that was Oliver North. He almost brought down the president. He got off. He was prosecuted. Okay, he was acquitted on a technicality, but nonetheless, okay, fine. He was acquitted. But he then launched a political career, and one has to say, one has to commend the common sense of the American people. They did not vote for Ollie North. He ran in Virginia. I can't remember. Was it Doug Wilder that he ran against? Or Chuck Robb? I can't remember. One of those that but it was completely hopeless.
Well, it's interesting if we want to go back to the cobwebs of history here. He was doing very well in the polls right up to election.
Right.
And Ronald Reagan, keeping the past tradition of former presidents of being, fading into the background, he came out and he said he chastised Oliver North. Stop using my name in your campaign. We don't know to this day if that was a determinative effect on his campaign. He obviously lost, but I mean, here's Reagan came out of retirement and scolded him in public.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. That's what happened. It was an extraordinary thing that, to be honest, I mean, everybody has been doing that ever since the Gipper left the scene in January '89. These tiresome Republicans constantly invoking his name, said, "Oh, Ronald Reagan." And I was in fact thinking today about, you remember when that Asa Hutchinson, that insipid Republican governor of Arkansas, and he was on with on Tucker Carlson, and they were talking about this legislation that he vetoed. Basically, it was against prohibiting sex change operations on preteens or even teens. And he said, well, I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican because Ronald Reagan said it's not up to government to tell people what to do. And Tucker asked him reasonably, so Ronald Reagan was in favor of chemical castration of little boys. I mean, that's the sort of the lunacy when all these tiresome Republicans invoke Ronald Reagan's name for every kind of nonsensical, pathetic position that they take.
It's even worse than that, because we can go back to 2016 and even earlier. Democrats invoke Ronald Reagan. I mean, there's a Ronald Reagan, there's one size that fits all now. That's a myth. The Ronald Reagan myth you can use for whatever purposes you want. It's really extraordinary.
Right. I think Herman Montoya says it was Chuck Robb in 1996, which I think sounds about right. I thought, for some reason, I thought it was 1994. Because that was a big Republican year, and I thought that was the year that North thought he was going to win.
Our Gaggler just proved that 3 heads are better than 1.
3 heads are better than 1. Yeah, no, that's right. It's a very, very extraordinary thing that this idea that you can keep invoking a man who won office 1980. He won. It was now more than 40 years ago. I mean, the world was a different place. The issues were very different, and to keep harping on, Ronald Reagan. I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican. It's pathetic. It makes the country look pathetic when you're so stuck in the past. I mean, I remember. All right, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the Republican Party was very different in 1980. Yes, right. It had been transformed over 8 years. And that is the transformation that everyone is talking about, okay? And it's that transformation that really damaged the Republican Party, in my opinion, because what we had was, we had a very traditional country club Republican Party, okay? And I mean that I use that as a smear in a way, okay?
Right.
But by the end of the Reagan presidency, the libertarians had taken over economic policy, and then with that devastation, then jump up into the Clinton administration, essentially doing everything that the same as that, but on steroids. I mean, so the Reagan years are very, very misunderstood because it's always used as it's an invented past it's an
invented past, and I think that's why it's very important. This is something we were talking about with Richard Barris the other day, which was that Reagan really moved away from a kind of Nixonian populism. I mean, Nixon was a genuine populist. I mean, I think he really did believe in economic policies that favored ordinary people. And that's why, as we were talking about the other day, I mean, that was quite a feat for him to get the AFL-CIO not to endorse the Democratic candidate. I mean, that was a historic first, but they did that in 1972. AFL-CIO just wouldn't endorse George McGovern. That was a great feat. I mean, that was for Nixon to have achieved that. But Reagan was a very different creature, and he was much more of a what you call a libertarian, or basically capital, and organized labor was absolutely devastated during the
air traffic controllers.
Yeah, the air traffic started with the air traffic controller, but in industry after industry, I mean, the unions were just simply destroyed. Where people used to have industrial jobs, good paying industrial jobs, they didn't have it at the end of the 80s. People used to work in slaughterhouses. I mean, it's not very nice work, but it was quite well paid. The slaughterhouse work, boom, that was all destroyed by
interesting, George. It's very interesting because I was thinking about this morning for some bizarre reason. Now it's coming up in our conversation. Is that, do you remember all of the Jimmy Hoffa films? Okay, I think Stallone did one of them. It was called Fisk or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was called Fist. Yeah, F-I-S-T. Yeah.
And what we had this onslaught from the media. Against labor unions were synonymous with corruption and thuggery and all of that, which that is in contrast to history itself. The middle class, as we understood it in our time growing up, they were union jobs.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. That was it. And of course, union jobs were the key to middle class prosperity and were key to Black economic advancement. I mean, it's no accident that the advancement of Blacks in American society began to decline in the 1980s. So the 1960s, now it's all presented, horrible, racist, and so on. But Blacks were doing pretty well because they were getting good unionized jobs, and it was leading to Black prosperity up in the 60s and 70s. And then once those jobs disappeared, blacks stopped advancing economically, and led to further social and economic problems. So in all sorts of ways, the Reagan years were terrible for the United States. But people remember him for the end of the Cold War. And so that's the Cold War ended. Ronald Reagan got tough with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union folded its cards. All of it, which of course is ludicrous, not only historically, because that's not what happened, but even logically, because there was absolutely no reason why the Soviet Union would get particularly frightened of Ronald Reagan and the United States. As, oh my God, we can't possibly compete. We're out of here. We're going to liquidate everything. But they wouldn't do that. They faced the Soviets, the communists used to face off much more formidable opponents than Ronald Reagan. So something else was going on. Exactly. And all of the Allied interventions after World War I and everything else. So something else was going on.
Keep an eye on the questions, but one of the things that's very interesting. I was thinking about this mantra about leaving Afghanistan. What about the women? What about the girls? Okay, well, sequencing and timeline is everything when it comes to an argument, and of course, for 19 and a half or 19 and 3/4 years, Nobody wanted to know about Afghanistan.
Right,
only, 20 minutes ago. Only 20 minutes ago. Oh. What about the women and girls? Well, I mean, who did the United States under Mr. Brzezinski, who did they promote? The Mujahideen, which would morph into something like the Taliban. Their treatment of women was appalling, okay? So you support the Mujahideen and you turn a blind eye to their treatment of women and girls. And even the current government that fled with all the money, their treatment of, over the entire landscape of Afghanistan was not much better, okay? All of this is myth generating, okay? Something must be done. Women and girls, okay? And, what if the 80,000 the people want to get out? They're all translators? Does anybody want to ask a serious question here?
No, I mean, the point about Zbigniew Brzezinski, his view, and look, I mean, that was pretty much the view of the Cold War establishment for decades, which is that anything at all is justifiable as long as it's bad for the Soviet Union. And so therefore, you organize a coup somewhere. Hey, well, it's not very nice. We've overthrown a democracy. An elected leader was murdered, as in Chile. But hey, the alternative is this would become a Soviet beachhead in Latin America. And so Brzezinski's view was, okay, fine, we will back these absolute retrograde, reactionary, terrible people, bloodthirsty warlords, we'll back them because the alternative is so much worse, which is the Soviet Union. And so in fact, when he was confronted, I think in a famous interview, I think it was about maybe it was about 1992, hey, don't you have now second thoughts about your support for the Mujahideen? He said, no, not at all. Because what's worse, the Mujahideen or the Soviet system? We got rid of the Soviet system, and so it's a great thing. So
but what about Afghanistan?
That mentality.
Yeah, well, what about Afghanistan?
He didn't care. I mean, he didn't care. He didn't care. His view was that as long as the Soviet Union has disintegrated, but it's just a great thing. I mean, he was so utterly monomaniacal. I mean, it's like Ukraine. I mean, if you ask him, hey, we're supporting people who were basically Nazi collaborators. I mean, these are terrible people that America's siding with. He'd say, okay, that's fine. At least they're on against the Soviet Union, they're against the Soviet system. So therefore, these are good guys. I mean, that was this Zbigniew Brzezinski's mentality.
And look what happened afterwards. Any questions?
There was somebody making a very reasonable, Herman Montoya said it was the Carter administration that created the Mujahideen, exactly, and that was Zbigniew Brzezinski. And then he said, well, Ronald Reagan invited the Mujahideen into the White House. Indeed, that is called, and he called them the freedom fighter. Yeah, and I remember there's that famous photograph in the Oval Office. These people sitting there, they look pretty terrifying. I mean, calling them freedom fighters.
Well, they were equivalent to America's founding fathers. That's what they said.
Yeah, that's right. The interesting thing is, of course, that in itself was also a fraud, because the Mujahideen movement was actually bankrolled by Saudi Arabia and by Osama bin Laden. So it wasn't like there was some indigenous rebellion against the Soviets. This was all, astroturfed. It was all done by bin Laden. And bin Laden went around the Arab world recruiting people for this cause, this holy war against the Soviet Union. And Reagan was really happy to sign on to that.
Yeah, and if we can just bring it up to the present, this ridiculous reporting without any foundation whatsoever is that the Taliban are back in league with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Well, first of all, ISIS didn't even exist when the Taliban came into existence. So that's just a misnomer completely. But I mean, if you look at the time that they were, yes, they did protect Al-Qaeda for a time. It was a temporary thing. But I mean, when the Taliban, they weren't defeated, they just went away. they broke all ties, and there is no evidence that they have any kind of. As a matter of fact, what they saw these people as troublemakers, and they actively went after them. Like, we don't want your trouble here. We'll make our own trouble. But the thing is that when Bin Laden, he recruited around the Arab world, and he, go to Afghanistan. That's the epicenter of our jihad. But the Afghans say, well, I mean, you're Uzbek. I mean, what are you doing here?
Right.
Well, why are you here?
Right. Well, look, but look. I mean, I think that they gave a
safe haven.
They gave a home to Bin Laden. I mean, even today, there was the Taliban spokesman saying that, well, we haven't seen any proof that Bin Laden was involved in 9/11, which is probably true. None of us has ever seen proof that Bin Laden was involved in 9/11. But he said, no, but we will never again. So they do accept that, we did give a home to these people. Absolutely. We won't again. So we'll see. I mean, the jury's obviously out on that.
Because the evidence proves the evidence that we're aware of is that the 9/11 events were planned in Hamburg and enacted in New Jersey. Right. Okay, so I mean, right. I mean, if you want to believe that a group of guys basically living in a 7th century environment in a cave did this, well, that's your opinion, and you're perfectly welcome to believe it.
Right. Well, yeah, it's. I mean, those they did have training camps. I mean, those were training camps for jihadis. And Bin Laden was involved in. He was clearly involved in Bosnia. I mean, that's documented evidence that he was actively involved in Bosnia, present personally in Bosnia, had been issued with a passport during the war in Bosnia. Of course, at that time, no one cared because, again, Bin Laden was on the side of the United States because the United States had decided to back the Bosnian Muslims. So I was perfectly happy to see, Bin Laden actively involved in Bosnia.
Remember, reminds me of that ridiculous Rambo. Was it Rambo? I mean, was Rambo in Afghanistan? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he was in. Yeah, he was.
And then and I don't know, it was like Rambo 15 or whatever.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yes.
But when they shoot down the Soviet helicopter, and the Afghans and Americans are singing "Kumbaya." I mean, people here watch it and just laugh.
Right. So some people are commenting on the USS Cole bombing in 2000, and I don't know. I mean, there may well be Al Qaeda was involved in that. I mean, who knows? It was a terrorist act. Was Al Qaeda may well have been involved. And I think these were bad guys. I mean, the Islamic fundamentalists are really bad guys. And I think the Taliban, after Clinton bombed Afghanistan a number of times, I think after the USS Cole, and maybe even before that, he'd also bombed Afghanistan. Again, these Al Qaeda training camps. Al Qaeda had clear warning. I mean, the Taliban had clear warnings that they are heading for trouble, and so it was up to them to clean up their act, because you don't want to antagonize the United States when you don't have any allies. And the Taliban had no allies in 2000, 2001. So when the United States went after them, not a dog barked.
And the Russians told the Taliban too that you're messing with bad people. The Russians informed the Americans that there's bad stuff going on in Afghanistan. It's not as if they weren't warned about what was going on here.
Right. No, exactly. So now, maybe they've learned their lesson. I mean, that's what they're indicating, that they've learned their lesson. They'll never do it, again. So, the jury's out at the moment. So we'll just see.
Or what do you want to do about it? Okay, all the Lindsey Grahams and the Oliver Norris and this Lara Logan, which I can't make any sense of whatsoever. I mean, she's on a roll of complete incoherence.
Yeah, it is complete incoherence. I mean, that bit when she was on with Colonel Douglas McGregor, and then she was going on and on and on like this. McGregor just rolled his eyes. It's very rare to see that. And then mysteriously, he was cut off. Boom! It's gone. Boom! That was it. It was over. But now, she's now on every night, and it's nuts, and I don't even understand what exactly she's arguing. I mean, she's saying, "Oh, the idea that we can't do anything is quite ridiculous. You know, we can do so much." What's the plan here? I mean, we had 20 years. Well, what do you?
We had 20 years.
Yeah,
we had 20 years.
20 years of plans. Yeah. So somebody's asking here, Harry Smith, why none of those brand new save the women interventionists ever say the same about the women of Saudi Arabia? Very good point. Very, very good point. Exactly. I mean, it's if that's going to be your big issue, save the women, save the women. Saudi Arabia is a good place to start.
Well, I mean, that was Donald Trump's first trip abroad. I mean, our good ally, the House of Saud. I mean, you have no leverage there. I can see you don't have any leverage with the Taliban right now. But what about the girls, women and girls in Yemen that the U.S. is complicit in war crimes? What about them? What all of the sanctions against Syria? What about those women and girls?
Right. And look,
we could go on all night long. Okay. Absolutely, and then you have these NGOs that's their primary focus, but they just take a nod from the U.S. government, okay? Whoever's in power, whoever is paying the piper.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that's right. And it's also very interesting because there's a long history of this, that the United States supporting the most retrograde Islamists. So remember, during the 1990s, the Americans were celebrating the Chechens. Oh, these are these great people, the Chechens. What wonderful, wonderful people. And you know what Chechen rule was like. I mean, it was.
I've been there.
Yeah, it was horrible. But the celebration. These Chechens used to come to Washington, and they go to all these think tanks, and they'd be feted. Again, people like Brzezinski and all of the rest of the.
While they had slave markets in Grozny.
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't just Afghanistan. I mean, we had the same thing in Bosnia, where again the Americans thought, hey, well, these Bosnian Muslims, these would be good allies. So they supported the Bosnian Muslims, sold us a bill of goods. Oh, they're all very sophisticated, very advanced. They're not at all retrograde. Well, they were, and but again, because they're useful allies, the Americans supported them. I mean, the global war on terror was always a fraud. I mean, the whole idea that we're going after them. No, you're only going after them because they hit you. That's good. If they hit Russia, they hit anyone else. Good riddance to them.
We've been talking now for about 27 minutes, George. You know what? One word we haven't used yet: democracy.
Right.
Because it's not in the cards. It never has been, and I don't see any reason why it ever would be.
Right. No, that's right. It never was. I mean, that was it. And and it goes even earlier than that. I mean, back even you talk about the 1950s. In the 1950s, again, the United States was supporting the Islamists in Egypt, because they didn't like NASA, the sort of the NASA's kind of secularism. I mean,
and nationalism.
Nationalism, absolutely. So, I mean, exactly. The United States supported Saudi Arabia against NASA. The very time that NASA was trying to minimize the poisonous, deleterious influence of Saudi Arabia on the Arab world, the Americans were backing Saudi Arabia.
That's right. It's one of the very interesting things is that this is when you have no knowledge and you're not unable to contextualize the situation. Nasser, he was a great Arab nationalist. He really was, because he spoke the entire Pan-Arab world, and he was a hero to them. And so what George is saying here is that the U.S. and particularly, including Britain and France, they saw the rise of Arab nationalism as a real threat. And what they did was, let's deny them their nationalism and push them into the mosque. And this is what happened. Okay, this is what happened.
Yep.
Remember, everybody. Remember, we're going to go way back now. In Versailles in 1919, Arab leaders all across the world, from tribes to clans to all kinds of, they went there and said, we want to be one country, like the United Arab States of the world, okay? And the West said no. Can you imagine what history, how it could have changed? Could you imagine how different things would be? And they went there and said, we want to be like you. We want to, like Egypt will be a state, Syria will be a state, but we'll be in one conglomeration, like the United States of America. And they were not given a hearing.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We just have a super chat from Kevin Dorr. Thank you very much, Kevin. Very, very kind of you. And he says, just watched Dan Crenshaw, who is a Republican congressman, on Fox talking about reinvading Afghanistan. What's wrong with these people? Wrong with I'm sure 20 years will work out much better. Yeah, exactly. The whole idea that the next 20 years are going to be so much better than the last 20.
Yeah, but it's such a good question and a good observation. Is that what was this war all about? Was it about us feeling good about ourselves or about helping a group of people? If you look at the rhetoric here, because I used to tell people, I told you this just recently, is that I stopped doing programs on Afghanistan because there was no context. People weren't hearing the story. It was being developed, okay? This is one of the things that the media and the political class do. They commit the sin of omission. They just don't even mention it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. It's just hilarious. It's very, very strange for the Republicans to go down this path because it's something that they hadn't learned. I mean, Donald Trump had very intelligently run in 2016 as the peace candidate. He had got around the Democrats and said, hey, we want to bring to an end these wars. We want to bring to an end interventionism. We want to focus on domestic issues. And it worked. It worked for the Republicans. And he made Hillary Clinton seem like the hawk, the war hawk. You want war everywhere. You want to take on the Russians everywhere. And this worked for them. But now the Republicans are boxing themselves in by attacking Biden. Oh, he's this wimpy and peace candidate. It's a foolish policy, because on this, Biden will prevail because nobody in America wants to go on fighting.
George pointed out to me, because I had forgotten it, he made me remember correctly again. I don't know how this is going to play out here because we have the internet today. When Saigon fell, we had very limited media sources. Today, it's very much more complicated. We're doing this, okay? But when Saigon finally fell, George, you want to tell the story? What happened to Gerald Ford's
right?
Polls?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I mean, Gerald Ford, basically, he did nothing. He could have done something. It was open to him. He was still the president, so he could still have launched bombing attacks on the North Vietnamese army. It was a straight, it was pretty much a conventional invasion that the North Vietnamese crossed the demilitarized zone. He didn't do anything. That was in 1975, and he did not get punished for it. The 1976 election was a very, very close affair. And even though Ford had fought off a very serious challenge within the Republican Party from Ronald Reagan, and usually that is suicide for any incumbent to have a strong challenge within your party. He fought that off, and it was a very tight election in 76. So he didn't pay any price at all because nobody wanted to go back into Vietnam.
As we speak right now on August 26th, and it's 7:30 my time in Moscow, Biden is in trouble for COVID. Yep. That will be the last thing, right. And the economy. It's not going to be this. But if the Republican parties can't screw their head on, and they never have, I just have right. so much of bile for these people, right. going on, and Fox fronting it. Sean Hannity, 11 days Americans under siege or hostage or whatever he's saying here. Just completely irresponsible rhetoric. You're actually working against the message that helped Donald Trump win in 2016. You fools, you fools.
Yeah. Well, that's right. It's and Trump, who had kind of moved away from that message himself, paid a price. He paid a price for that because he had run on a particular platform, and then he kind of wanted to have it both ways. Well, I'm still against war. I'm still against interventionism. I still want to have good relations with Putin, but I'm also the tough guy. I'm the guy who assassinated Soleimani. I'm the guy who picked a fight with Iran. So Trump really wasn't sure which one he wanted to be, and he paid the political price for it. Should have been a very easy, comfortable victory for him. And the Democrats, they were on the wrong side of the issue because, first of all, they were on the wrong side of the issue in 2016. Then they embarked on this loony Russiagate craze, trying to prove something that was patently absurd from the start, which was that somehow Trump was an agent of the Kremlin. I mean, it's a ludicrous, stupid idea. And the Republicans should have just absolutely hit it out of the park. And they failed to do so.
Yeah. I mean, we know now that there were senior Republicans in the Congress that knew it was all a hoax and just let it go. Let them play this game here. Shame on them. Okay, I'm talking about people like Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio and all of these other fools. Okay.
Yeah. No, that's right. And also, they were slimy opportunists. I think they didn't like Trump. They wanted Trumpism to go away, and they were more than happy to go along with the official line. Well, let's see what Mueller comes up with. Well, let Mueller conduct his investigation. And what you remember, Lindsey Graham, he sponsored legislation prohibiting Trump from firing Mueller, and so they all pretend, well, we need to get to the bottom of this.
And what was the bow on top? Let's get Bill Barr back at Attorney General. That was the finishing. That was the frosting on the cake.
It's just, and now we have this an absolute losing message. I mean, it's one thing to say that you don't like wars, but you can't just simply say, well, all right, well, I'm all for getting out of Afghanistan, but not in this way. Well, what bloody way are you going to get out? Whichever way you're going to go, it's going to be very, very painful. I mean, there is no good way of getting out of it. I mean, it was so, just as in Vietnam, just as the French in Algeria, the British in India, there's no smooth way. Well, adios, amigo, we'll remain friends.
This is how wars end, everybody. Right. Why should this one be any different? Having said that, I think that whoever and that this person is probably hiding, who designed this withdrawal. I mean, I'm perfectly willing to say it's botched, okay, but I don't see anything clean ever to come out of these things here whatsoever. Okay, I did these people, the people that are sounding off the loudest about the withdrawal are the ones, most of them are, if not all of them, were involved in creating this mess in the first place. Right. So I mean, they delete themselves in my mind, okay, from the get-go. I mean, why should I listen to you? Yep. You were one of the cheerleaders.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why when you get somebody like Douglas McGregor, he really is almost alone in saying, this was a bloody bad war organized by very bad people. And even the minimum that you would expect them to have achieved, which is an organized evacuation, something the military should be experienced in doing, they bungled. So the idea that we're going to go back in and this time we'll be successful, I mean, your track record doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
If you bungled the war for 20 years, I guess we could expect you're going to bundle the withdrawal. Okay, I think that's a fair, logical conclusion, George.
So we have Marie-Kate Orga asks, is this why they are after Assange? Because he knew what was going to happen in Afghanistan. Well, I think that there are many reasons why they're after Assange, but there's no question that Assange revealed an awful lot of embarrassing details about America's multifarious wars over the years. And certainly Afghanistan is one of them. I think the Afghan war diaries were kind of quite a horrific read.
Well, I'm really glad that Julian Assange was brought up in WikiLeaks here, because I've known George for a very long time, and our kind of ecosystem before the revelations came out, we all had a pretty good idea of what was all going on here. What Julian Assange did in WikiLeaks it confirmed, and as I remember, because I was in an event right before the lockdown started. I think it was like in March of 2020. I was in an event in London.
Yeah, that's it. I went to
you followed a few months later.
I went September of the following year. Yeah.
And so what I told the crowd that had gathered, I said, because of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, we all knew that we weren't crazy. We were actually on the right track. And he confirmed it for us with great detail. Yeah. And I want to plug WikiLeaks. Look at all these news organizations that you get information from on a 24/7 basis for years. WikiLeaks has never got it wrong once. They have an impeccable, pristine record.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. But it is an ironic issue, I think, that Maria's asked, which is something we need to address, and is that those who are against war, those who expose war crimes, those who expose lies, pay a heavy price. Those who promote wars, those who lie countries into wars, go on to illustrious careers, media, think tanks, speaking circuit, and a job in the next administration. It's a really very, very bitter view of the world. I mean, that really, this is, you're a truth sayer, and this is what happens. You're in a supermax prison for years. You haven't done anything, and you're in a prison. Not done anything. You've spoken truth.
And people that are the worst of us get promoted all of the time and become rich and get celebrity. And what this does is it promotes a culture and a mindset of incompetence. You can get away with it. There's no downside of screwing up everything that you do and everything that you touch. It is a promotion of a culture of incompetence.
Right. So we have a super chat from Jonathan, who asks, would you consider inviting Doomcock for a chat? He's a pop culture commentator, and you can diversify your topics. So it goes by Overlord DVD on YouTube. I have to say, I don't know that much about Doomcock. Do you, Peter?
No, I'm afraid not.
Yeah, I know.
But we basically, George and I, we never say never. I mean,
never say never. Absolutely.
Everybody should know. I mean, George and I make appearances on other fora, and we're the only two conservative. Almost always we're the only two. Okay, but we are more than willing to engage people. We're more than willing to talk to people and exchange ideas. I thoroughly enjoy that kind of thing.
Right. I think so. I know Doomcock has been on with Viva and Barnes. I mean, I think that he's appeared with them on the Sidebar.
Well, that's a good recommendation for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good recommendation. So maybe we definitely should do that. So then we have a question from Nigel Baird, who says, acting unilaterally, has the United States caused the amount of fracture with its NATO allies as is being touted by the media and their military contributions. All right, what do you think, Peter?
Well, I mean, it's really easy to say now. I mean, a lot of these NATO countries were big boosters for the conflict, because they got, quote unquote, the glory, the recognition, they're doing their part and all that. But no, it was more, like always with NATO, everything is a fig leaf, okay? And they were following the hegemon. What really annoys them is that the hegemon didn't tell them what they were up to. That's what they're angry about. But it shows and I don't care if it's Trump or Biden or Obama, it doesn't matter, okay? They all have complete disdain for NATO. It's just a useful idiot operation. It is a PR operation, and it's a cudgel when you need it. Russiagate, okay? So, I mean, but at the end of the day, if you're going to write the history, take out the US, but the history of NATO and Afghanistan, it's a pretty thin volume. And it's nothing to be proud of.
And I think that's the thing. I think the unilateralism, well, the unilateralism comes about because NATO, the NATO partners, they just accepted that, the United States, it runs NATO. It's basically a fig leaf for the United States. So the United States can pretend that it's a member of a coalition, and they've gone along with it. They have never tried to challenge U.S. leadership, and so occasionally they come along and say, "Oh, well, they're acting unilaterally. They're not consulting us." No, first of all, why would you consult? I mean, if you're just a doormat, why would I consult the doormat? Well,
if you're a doormat, expect to be stepped on.
Exactly. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm going to put my dirty feet all over you. I mean, you're a doormat, so what do you expect? I mean, so that's it's always a little. That's why this whole thing. Well, like the G7 meeting. Well, we're not at all happy with this. Well, hey, no one's stopping you. You want to go back into Kabul? You're welcome to it. Of course they're not going to do it.
Biden's whirlwind tour, and it was G7, and then with NATO and all of that, and and of course, it's as I always like to say, I'm sure the buffets were great, and the menus you could probably saved and brought home with you, probably put it on Instagram or something like that, and then this kind of catastrophe comes. Why didn't they tell us? I mean, but no, the whole point is the buffet. Okay.
Yeah,
that's the point.
That's right. And really, when you look at the state of the military, I mean, this guy Milley. I mean, we have him with talking about white rage, but remember, he's given interviews to reporters, written books in which he's explicitly likened Trump to Hitler. And he's likened Trump's supporters to Hitler's brown shirts. Now, this is, this isn't some stupid little, 19-year-old sophomore pontificating away about politics. This is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the most senior military officer in the U.S. military, and this is the way he talks. Now, how can we expect anything from a creature like that? I mean, it's juvenile. I mean, you think of. Can you imagine, someone like Shoigu, the defense minister of Russia, or Gerasimov, or talking in this way, talk about brown shirts and Hitler. I mean, it's juvenile, and no wonder you mess everything up.
Well, maybe not everyone knows those names. So let's give one of the most famous names in American military history, George C. Marshall. Do you think that he was talking about the FDR? I think we need to work on Jim Crow in the South. Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe he had feelings about that, but it wasn't his writ. No, exactly. It wasn't his mandate. His mandate was to give. And what is the Joint Chief supposed to do? Advise the President of the United States on the defense of the United States.
That's right.
Not on your political preferences. Milley's the type of guy that's like I was with the president and he preferred vanilla ice cream. George C. Marshall would never make that comment, okay? As I told George, FDR, he loved to cajole people, manipulate people. He was a real person-to-person person. He really knew how to get inside someone's head. He never could do it with George C. Marshall. He was like a brick wall. And he just listened to the president and gave the president advice. Will that be all, Mr. President? Thank you, Mr. President. And he walked out the door. He never allowed a friendship because he didn't want to be cajoled. His job was to give advice, and particularly during one of the most important dramatic events of American history, the Second World War.
Right. You absolutely cannot have military men, the most senior officers, start pontificating about presidents. I mean, they may like this president, they may not like some other presidents, but you cannot have them giving their views about any president. I mean, whether it's Trump or whether it's Biden or Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton, it's not their job. And it becomes very alarming when they not only start giving their views about different presidents, but when they openly say they're not going to obey a particular president because they think he's Hitler. I mean, it really isn't up to them to make these stupid, juvenile judgments, particularly when they have very serious consequences. What, you're not going to obey the orders of the president because you think he's Hitler? This is really deplorable, and it's no accident that this is the man who completely bungled. The one thing he was, he had no other task than this one, and you made a complete hash of it.
Yeah, and by calling the commander-in-chief, likening him to Adolf Hitler, which that's what the left always, everybody's Hitler. Have you noticed? Everyone's Hitler. Or you don't like them, they're Hitler, okay? But these people, there's only one historic figure, and they don't even know the historical significance. It's just a label. But George, what about going down the chain of command? What have other people said? Why is my commander, my immediate superior, likening the president to Hitler? I voted for him. And then what you do is you destroy morale in the rank, and then you can't say anything, and then you isolate people. And George, when push comes to shove and you're in the trench, you got to have the other guy's back because he's going to have yours. But if you're worried, this is insanity.
Right. Yeah, that's right. There's a question here, which is kind of interesting, from Herman Montoya. It says, Viktor Orban is pro-Western, pro-NATO, pro-Israel, and pro-American. Orban is not a real conservative. Tucker Carlson has his blind spot on that. It's kind of an interesting issue because, of course, you're absolutely right on all of these things about Orban. But you also have to think about this is a person who is prime minister of a very small country, stuck right in the middle of Europe. It's very centrally located, and one that is tends to get bullied from the east and from the west. And his view, I think, is you try to get along as well as you can with everyone. And I think his view is that when East and West are in conflict, Hungary is right in the middle, and that's the one that gets stepped on most easily. So I think that he really isn't particularly pro-NATO. I mean, I think that it's just he's a member of NATO. He's there.
What can he do about it?
There's nothing much he can do about this. But he has defied the EU more than anyone else has done. He has defied contemporary ideology more than anyone else has done. And the Israel thing is a kind of an interesting thing. What that about? I mean, it's a little. I mean, I think there's a personality issue as well. I think why Putin and Netanyahu get along so well. I mean, Putin, Netanyahu, and Trump get along so well. I think there's a personality type they get along. I think Orban is, I think, part of that kind of personality club. It's not so much an ideological thing. It's a kind of a personal affinity. And I don't know whether Orban has such good relations with the new people in Israel as he had with Netanyahu.
Well, of course, you know far more about it than I do, but the question, dealt with certain policy positions, and basically, Orban, if you boil it down, I mean, he wants to protect Hungarian culture. I mean, NATO, yeah, well, we're a member. Okay, fine. Okay, the West is a civilization, essentially is pro-Israel, which is a very long discussion we could have there. the Russians, they're not even on our border. Why are we worried about them? I mean,
Right.
it's kind of, it's driven by culture and by why make trouble where you don't need it.
I think that's right. But I think that after all, and he has defined both the EU and NATO and the United States in continually cultivating good relations with Russia. I mean, he more than anyone else in Europe has had good relations. He had Lavrov visited Budapest a couple of days ago, and always has good relations. I think his policy is you get along with everyone, and that that's how you stay out of trouble. When you don't, when you start antagonizing Russia unnecessarily, like the Baltic states, and then with Poland you antagonize Russia and you antagonize the EU, and then I think you start getting yourself into trouble. You never want to get yourself isolated from when you got East and West against you.
An advice to small countries, beware of punching up, because it doesn't usually work out.
Punching up is not a good idea. So here, reckless abandon. That's a nice name, reckless abandon. I heard a rumor that Putin's German biographer told Russian media that after Biden's quote killer unquote remark, he called Putin and apologized the next day. I haven't heard that, but it's quite possible, because that interview did set in train a change of policy toward Russia. I mean, I think that because I think they spoke on the phone not long after, and I think that then they started talking about a summit. We're going to have a summit, and some of that, the belligerence on issues such as Ukraine and the hacking and the rest of it, that definitely toned it down.
And Nord Stream was still in play.
Yeah, Nord Stream was in play. But up until then, up until that killer remark, I mean, the Biden was pursuing essentially continuing with the whole democratic anti-Putin rhetoric of the past 4 years. So it was they just continued with all of that. But I think something changed after that.
If you remember the questioning, I mean, it was basically, again, when did you stop beating your wife question? I mean, and he fell for it. I mean, there were so many different ways that question could have been answered. Okay. Right. And he took the least resistance path that made him look weak. Okay. He is weak because he's just following what everybody else says. He doesn't, right. I thought we were going to get some, leadership from you. He exhibited no leadership.
Exactly. You would have thought somebody like him, who's been in politics for 50 years, should know how to swat away a question like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he walked right into it. Look, I mean, I think there's no question. I think Biden really, he's not in copo mentis. I mean, he really doesn't, often know where the hell he is. I mean, sometimes, they pump something into him and he seems reasonably coherent. But a lot of the time is absolutely no idea what's going on, and that's kind of an example of it. He just made a total fool of himself, as he did with the recent interview with Stephanopoulos also.
Yeah. And he looks good compared to Kamala Harris.
Yes.
The world we live in.
So we have from Jonathan, Orban pursues the most rational policy that benefits and protects Hungary's sovereignty. I think I agree with that. And then we have Harry Smith. I wish Australia had heard George's advice there before stupidly antagonizing China for no reason whatsoever last year. That was an interesting thing. What was Australia doing, antagonizing China last year? That was a bizarre episode. Remember that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was it trade was the issue. I'm trying to remember what was going on here.
Yeah, yes, yeah, no, that's right. It was something like that, but it really became quite hostile. I mean, it was.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, and we're going to be talking about this ad infinitum here. Is that there are people in Australia that realized how exposed they are with trade relations to China, and George and I are pro sovereignty and go right. Australia, but then China's going to do what it's going to do to advance its interests here. Okay, and it's really interesting. I'm really glad that was brought up, and I'll have to go back and take a look at the details here. Right. But what was interesting for me is the Chinese reaction, which we up until then I can remember telling you, George, when the Saakashvili invaded South Ossetia, and the Chinese at the UN Security Council said, we are concerned about the situation. Which of course everyone, when they say concerned, it means they're really, really worried. Okay, it was always a very interesting linguistic experience for the Chinese. That's gone. That's completely gone. And and we saw that with Australia, is that they just kind of took a mask off, and they went to the almost kind of like a Maoist running dog capitalist type thing. That's what it was more similar to than we're concerned. It's very interesting, the change in rhetoric.
That's right. So there's a question here from Kiro Lewis. Is there any secessionist sentiment of Russian-speaking people in Ukraine toward the Kiev government? I would have thought yes.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is a perfect example in counter narratives. So let's go back to 2014, during the Kiev's assaults on Lugansk and Donetsk. The Russians are meddling in Ukraine. The Russians are spearheading secession, and then the narrative where I live is Putin isn't doing enough. Why isn't he helping them more? And that was the outrage here. Why is it? That's family. It's literally family. Because up until that point in time, the international border dividing Russia and Eastern Ukraine, it was just Google Maps will tell you where it is, but for the people that live there, I live in Russia. I'm going to work, honey, and that means you're going to Ukraine across the border.
Right.
I mean, it's people try to find parallels. Like how close England is to Scotland. I mean, there's you can't even compare it to that. It's the same people, same communities, same language, same everything.
Right.
So that is something that not only were the Russians asleep at the switch in 2014 when the coup happened. A lot of people were saying, there was a severe criticism of Putin in his circle for not doing more for what we call the Novorossiya or the Donbass.
That's right.
But see, you see how completely opposite the narratives are.
Right. No, that's right. I mean, the Bolsheviks kind of created this this absurd state, and they took territory that was clearly Russian. I mean, this was always in part of Russia. It had not been historically part of Ukraine. They added it onto Ukraine
and Galicia.
Yeah, that's right. That was the later editions by Stalin. So here you had the Lenin's edition, then you had the Stalin's edition. So you created this, this very jumbled, incoherent state. But what happened is that these people in the southeast of Ukraine, twice, in 2004, 2014, the person they voted for was basically overthrown. And then when that happens, basically, you can just vote whoever you want, and we're just simply going to ignore your will. Well, why should they stay on? Why should they want to stay on in that country?
Add on the Party of Regions, which was Yanukovych's vehicle. So what does Poroshenko do? You ban the party. Oh, and then you ban the Communist Party. You confiscate their buildings. Okay. I mean, what they did is that they wanted just to not only did Crimea leave not to participate, which tipped everything. They made sure that there would be Kiev, what I call official Kiev, and their Galician ideology, which is ethno-nationalism, which we're supposed to all hold our nose about. Okay, what they did was they wanted to completely disenfranchise the eastern part of the country. As I said to a quote unquote Ukraine expert, he said, "Oh, Peter, don't worry, everything will be fine with Ukraine and all that." And I said, "You know what you've created? You've created a nationalism without a nation, and that's going to haunt Ukraine forever until they resolve it."
Right. So we have a question here from Fallschirmjäger. Fallschirmjäger, so all right, sounds like German. It says, "How long do you guys think that the U.S. empire will last after losing in Afghanistan? Also with the understanding of Afghanistan as a graveyard of empires." Well, I actually think that the United States will brush this aside as it has brushed aside previous debacles. I mean, the debacle in Southeast Asia looked as if that really would put a crimp in the U.S. imperial machine. It really didn't. I mean, there was a couple of years of introspection, and in no time at all, America was back.
Yeah, that was the deer hunter years.
Exactly, the deer hunter. That's right. Yeah, the deer hunter years, and Apocalypse Now. Yeah. But I think in this case, I think America will bounce back even more quickly. And I mean, you're already seeing this now. I mean, at least during the Vietnam debacle, no one really wanted to go back in. You didn't have let's say Mac Bundy or McNamara types going on television saying, "Damn it, Gerald Ford has betrayed us. All the hard work that we did, we should go back into Vietnam." No one did that. So everyone who was involved in Vietnam during the Kennedy-Johnson years, everyone who was involved in Vietnam during the Nixon years, they all agreed, we're out of here. This is already very different. That's why I think America will bounce back and will be, as belligerent, maybe even more belligerent in the coming years, because they're going to find some new place to intervene to make up for this one.
Yeah, I have maybe a nuanced reaction to that. Is that I think that the writing is on the wall. The Middle East, as it's defined by Western policymakers, is a strategic backwater now, and they know it. Okay, and I think the region knows that the U.S. doesn't have the fire in the stomach to continue it. It doesn't mean they won't have interest in other parts of the world. Okay, and ultimately to kind of completely answer that question. Well, George and I in the Gaggle for over a year now have made it very clear that what needs to be done is that the U.S. has to completely reassess its economic model. Its experience with globalization is a complete, utter catastrophe because the empire is run on debt. Okay, it's not a run on productivity. And if you want to be a great power, you have to make things people want. Right. And you have to have a society that has, that Benedict Anderson, a really good historian, who wrote a book called Imagine Communities. And a great deal of our experience in our society are imagined things. I mean, and they're good things. We want to think of ourselves as good people. Okay, and we need that kind of ideal in the U.S. And obviously we don't have that, right. And we haven't learned the lesson. I mean, George and I have talked a lot, and we will talk a whole lot more about how to approach China because the elites just can't get on board. I mean, they just can't get on board to protect the United States of America and its population. And their run with globalization is a net positive for a country like China. I mean, unbelievably positive for them. It is for the middle class in the United States. It's been a gross negative, a net negative. Okay, right. So I mean, you and I have talked about this so much. If you want to just add on to that.
No, I think that's right. I mean, that's it clearly is. You have an economy that is not serving the American middle class. I mean, it has been deindustrialized, but it is an economy that has worked very well for the financial interests. It's worked very well for the military interests. It's worked very well for big tech.
Big pharma.
Yeah, big tech, big pharma. So for them, war is not a bad thing. And so while Trump said, okay, we're going to withdraw from Afghanistan, we're going to withdraw from Syria, he didn't withdraw from Syria. And I would be very, very surprised if Biden continues with the policy of withdrawal. I think Afghanistan was a kind of a one-off. He finished off Trump's policy, but I doubt whether he's going to withdraw from Syria.
Well, to be determined. Okay, that's
to be determined.
It'll be a very interesting discussion when.
No, I think so, but I think with Syria, the view will be almost certainly prevail within foreign policy circles. You withdraw from Syria and you give Russia an enormous strategic victory. And I think that will be the. I'm not saying I don't agree with that, but that's going to be the idea behind it. And I don't think Biden's going to is going to tackle that one.
Yeah, and he'll be, to use Biden's own words, he's being jammed. Okay. Because you know, Syria and its relationship with Russia is so over exaggerated. It's amazing how exaggerated it is. It's just another cudgel. You know, if we don't fight them there, they're going to fight them here, and this is ridiculous. But we should do a separate video on that. We can update it.
Right. No, I think that's right, and I think that's why when Trump proposed, he did it a couple of times. He said we're going to withdraw from Syria. The opposition was absolutely ferocious, even more so than even in the case of Afghanistan. So it's like, so I think that one is just, yeah, exactly, because whatever, you're allowing a genocidal killer Bashar al-Assad to survive. A huge victory for Putin and the Ayatollahs and whatnot and whatnot. I think it's that's a whole different kettle of fish.
And the Kurds were, of course, on Normandy with us. Okay.
Yep. Well, that's the thing about Trump. Trump had a way of expressing himself. Everyone got infuriated by this, but anyone with intelligence knew exactly what Trump meant. When he said, "Oh yeah, the Kurds were with us on Normandy beaches," it's a vivid way of expressing himself, but very salient.
Every once in a while, clairvoyance was there. Yeah.
Yeah. Where were we? Yeah. Blah 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 blah. And there's some number of questions about the military-industrial complex, and of course, it is the case that the American economy has been powered by the amount that it contributes to the military, and of course, that in itself was important in the development of big tech. I mean, the computer industry and the Pentagon were intimately linked, all the way back to the 1950s in the era of the mainframe computers. It was always part of military investment. So
the military invented email.
Exactly. All of that it was all of the military. So I mean, when there was supposedly the peace dividend. You remember the peace dividend? Was after the end of the Cold War. That lasted all of about 20 minutes. Oh yeah, we'll have a peace dividend. Right away, we're back to maintaining Cold War levels of military spending.
Okay, I mean, look, everyone, is that for 20 years you had a war in Afghanistan. The numbers, there are different numbers there. It's over $2 trillion. So let's just do the math. Okay, 365 times 20. Okay, and then divide it by it's a 2.2 trillion dollars. That's $300 million a day.
Right.
A day, and 80 to 90% of it went to Afghanistan and flowed right back into the U.S. to contractors. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what happened. So I mean, even all the things we did for the Afghan people actually didn't do much. Okay, not much at all. A total scam.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, when you think of it, the $2.3 trillion, and but this is the problem about the United States and how it spends its on the military. You say 2.3 trillion, and then okay, well, that's that's 2.3 trillion. I mean, imagine you throw around, say, oh well, I sort of I spent $1 million and I kind of lost it all at the gambling table. Okay, well, just move on to the next thing. I mean, so it just doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's like, you can spell it out and say, do you know what we could have spent that $2.3 trillion on? Well, probably wouldn't have spent it anyway on that, but that's it. It's just gone out of the window. And for what? You achieve exactly nothing. So that's why they keep clinging to the story about the Afghan women and girls. You have to at least come up with something. What did you spend the $2.3 trillion on? The women and the girls. We did it for the women and the girls. $2.3 trillion.
Just show you just how callous this money was wasted. Look at all the material that's been left behind. I mean, I don't know how much a Humvee costs, but they're really expensive, okay?
Right.
And a Black Hawk helicopter has got to be expensive, okay? And they just kind of like, leave it, okay?
That's it, exactly. Leave it, yeah, that's right.
It boggles the mind of just this whole culture of waste. Is it? Right. Well, it's all paid for, so whatever, and you just leave it behind. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So, another super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. Jonathan says, I'm astonished how those Republican senators that are owned by the military-industrial complex remain in office as their voters become viciously anti-interventionist. Well, that's a very interesting issue. I mean, what happens is that this political cycle is one that voters really don't get much of a say in all of this. So the politicians, hey, election time comes and they make all the right noises, I'm with Trump, I'm against forever wars, we got to bring it an end, we blah blah. Then you get elected and then you just ignore it, and you're back. So Lindsey Graham, I mean, it's like, here he is. There was a very good item, maybe you probably saw it on Tucker Carlson the other day, how he supported every single one of Biden's judicial nominees. And then when it's election time, Lindsey Graham said, I'm going to fight to the bitter end. I'm not going to allow one of these damn Democrat.
That's exactly how he talks.
That's it. All these damn liberals. I'm not going to tolerate these liberals. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to hold hearings. Yeah, I'm going to hold hearings about Russiagate. I'm going to hold hearings about all the stories and the Steele dossier and FBI gate and whatnot. And he never holds any of these hearings. So what happens is that with politicians is particularly the Republicans, they've learned how to mouth the slogans election time, and then they just sort of quickly forget about it once the election is over.
Yeah. It's what the donors want. That's what they care about. Okay, yes. That's what they care. Yeah. And obviously, it's an insider game. I mean, all of these consultants. I mean, if you're thinking about working with an forever war candidate, well, you might get blacklisted in the next cycle. Okay, right. I mean, it could happen. Okay. Right. Because this consultancy class is very, very rich, and they're very much sought after because of their ability to message and things like this. And remember, it was 2016. No, I'm sorry, it was 2000. When did Ron Paul run for president?
2012.
2012. So remember Iowa. This is I love this story. All of the CNN and MSNBC, so-and-so came in first and so-and-so came in third. Right. They never mentioned Ron Paul's name, ever. No. They mentioned first person, third person, but the second person didn't seem to have any relevance. We find out 2 or 3 weeks later that Ron Paul actually won the Iowa caucus. Yeah. So someone that couldn't even utter his name actually won.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And that's it. And that was that's the way you operate it. So today, I mean, people have been following on the internet. There was a denunciation of Governor Kristi Noem by Matt Walsh. He's a podcaster. He often appears on Tucker Carlson. And the gist of what Matt Walsh was saying is that I'm sick. He said, I'm sick to death of these Republicans who say, I want power, I'm going to do all this when I get power. And then they get power, and then they do absolutely nothing. And then they duly lose the election. And then when they lose the election, they go back and go, yeah, give me power, and I'm going to do this, and this. And then they never do it. And Kristi Noem is a classic case. Kristi Noem, whatever the issue, she just does what the Chamber of Commerce tells her to do. They said that, if they don't like something, and she's the one who basically is saying, "Oh, I'm going to fight the government on the vax mandate," but you're not going to fight the corporations when they bully their employees to get vaccinated. Well, I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican. Businesses.
There you go again.
They should be able to do whatever they want. Okay, so that's a nice one. You just attack Biden, but the actual people who implement the mandate, the powerful corporations, you're not going to do that. Well, people should go look for other jobs. Oh, yeah, of course, you can just go look for a job. Well, I don't like this job. I'm going to go find another job.
What's so pathetic is that they don't want to address real issues that affect real working people, middle-class people that George and I always speak up for, because they're the forgotten people. They're the most powerless people in the political system right now, and they're under siege, okay? In every single possible way. And that's Black people, brown people, white people, all people, okay? But at the end of the day, George, what do these people want to do? They want to fight the culture war, okay? It's like, no, but whoa, what about Dr. Seuss, okay? But they don't care about the conditions of working people. Now, I don't think Dr. Seuss should be banned, okay? Oh, well, what about his images of Japanese characters in his books? Yeah, well, he wrote it during the Second World War, okay? I mean, maybe there's a reason for it, okay?
But that's the thing. I mean, the point about this, the culture wars, is that ultimately, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, if you're Kevin McCarthy and you're minority leader, or even if you become House Speaker, there's nothing you can actually do about it. So it's an easy one. It's so easy. I can just talk about the culture war because nothing much that I can actually do about it. But it's an amazing phenomenon of the sort of Republicans or conservatives who really, they want power, but when they get it, they just they don't really do anything about it. I mean, Lindsey Graham, he goes to his voters in South Carolina, very conservative state, and election time comes, and he makes all the right noises, gets reelected, boom, and then he's got 6 years of basically just going along with the Democrats, which is all that he does. Would have to wonder what Lindsey Graham is really about, because he's just a bizarre phenomenon of somebody who just always goes along with the Democrats. You always think, do they have something on him? Because
well, I mean, the thing is, the conservatives always say it's the left that is they're just full of virtue signaling, that they have no substance to it. Well, these Republicans are no different at all. Okay, not at all.
Right.
They are political bedfellows. So what they do is they get people riled up over an issue, but the status quo is maintained, and that's the point, isn't it?
Right. So there's another question here by Mary-Kate Orga. We already had another question that we answered earlier. She says, anyone know what George Soros and Elliot Abrams are up to these days? And then she asked, Hillary Clinton is also gone too quiet for my liking. That is actually very, very interesting. I hadn't really thought of that. Yeah, where is Hillary Clinton? I mean, she was always shooting her mouth off with Trump. You have to then wonder, she also may well be just biding her time, waiting for Biden to implode. She's not that old. She's younger than Biden. She's not somebody who just gives up on her ambitions. She's not someone who's like,
you never.
The time has passed and I'm done. She's not that person.
Kind of a derivative of that, which I'm actually very interested in, and nobody wants to speak out or go public. I really want to know is that, what is the Obama-Clinton dynamic, okay? Because, I see that, Obama's more of the wholesale, and then and Hillary's more retail, okay, in politics here. And I think that there's the Obama crowd really wants to shut out the Clintons, okay, once and for all. And this may be something going on in there right now. But you're right, never count Hillary out, never.
Yeah, because, she's a hawk, and she sees Biden kind of apparently imploding on this issue for the time being. Anyway, he's imploding on this issue. Hey, her position is that she's available, so she has to be very careful how she plays her cards. She doesn't want to come out and attack Biden, because the Democrats will not forgive her for attacking the leader. On the other hand, she can't go in and say, yeah, I'm with Biden all the way, he's doing the right thing. So it is an interesting, her silence, and no one else has pointed this out, her silence is actually quite intriguing, because she's not a person who ever loses an opportunity to shoot her mouth off on something.
A quiet Hillary is a dangerous Hillary.
Very quiet, exactly. She's a predator, so that, the quiet, when a predator goes quiet.
She's on one of those walks in the forest, and you can see her eyes lit up looking like a wolf.
So I think, but as for George Soros and Elliot Abrams, I imagine, they're doing the same sort of thing. I mean, I don't know exactly what Elliot Abrams is doing. I mean, he's probably doing the same thing he's always been doing. He's probably at some think tank somewhere, picking up a very nice paycheck and waiting for the next Republican administration for another
what he's doing is, hey, let's get the Northern Alliance band back together again.
Yeah, exactly.
And Ollie North will work with me. Okay, yeah, let's get the band back together.
Yeah, that's right. And then what was it? Harry Smith says Hillary stuck her nose and Rolodex into the Ohio by-election. I think the Ohio primary. To keep Nina Turner out of Congress.
Nina Turner out. Very smart.
Yeah,
good observation. That's right. She did stick her nose in that.
Yeah. And then Rail Fanning Points 2.0 says it does not matter to the Davos crowd who is elected president as long as it's someone in league with them. I actually do think that. I mean, I think that you really have, the president increasingly just doesn't really matter. I mean, which is why, you have footballers now running to be president, you have movie actors, you have Caitlyn Jenner running for governor, that she's not going to win. It's like, it doesn't matter, it's a nice kind of figurehead, because you're not going to be making any decisions anyway. So they bump you into a nice plush office, but the decisions are being made elsewhere.
The presidency is just turning into a celebrity thing. That's what it is. It's a celebrity thing for celebrities. I mean, look who Barack Obama spent his 60th birthday party. It was just with TikTok people, Instagram people. I mean, Joe wasn't invited. Hillary wasn't there. Okay, but it was just what it is there's been this transmigration of a political office into a celebrity office, okay, or celebrity position. Okay, I mean, it is a degradation, because the president doesn't really matter, because the strings are being pulled elsewhere.
Right. There's kind of a very amusing comment by Apache Chief. It has just been announced that those killed in the explosions in Kabul died of COVID. Yes. COVID. Well, it doesn't matter. You would blow up, but he had COVID, so let's put it down on COVID.
I'll tell you, these terrorists who don't wear masks, they're the real problem.
They're absolutely. If they haven't been vaccinated, I mean, they're absolutely lethal.
We need a mandate.
Suicide bomber who hasn't been vaccinated.
We need a mandate. We need a mandate on this.
Okay? Exactly. In fact, I'm surprised people aren't calling the unvaccinated suicide bombers. I mean, I have to think. I'm sure that's the one that's coming. You are a suicide bomber.
George, you did it again. Someone's going to tell someone, they're going to tell another person, this time tomorrow, we're going to hear it, okay? You did it, you got to be careful, okay?
I know.
Because I said before, George should have gone into think tankistan because he'd be a very rich man because he has these evil thoughts. He should monetize them, okay?
Absolutely. There's a question by Herman Montoya. Why did Trump hire John Bolton, Elliot Abrams, Mike Pompeo, Steve Mnuchin, Gary Cohn, Bill Barr, who were all part of the swamp? Trump didn't drain the swamp. Trump was part of the swamp. It's a question that is very hard to answer.
Yeah.
Why he did that? I mean, because it's like he almost exclusively only hired these people. Because when we were talking with Richard Barris the other day about Nixon, because Nixon also hired essentially Washington old hands. But he also hired some others. I mean, people who weren't really Washington hands. I mean, the fact he hired Pat Buchanan. I mean, that was somebody who was precisely out of Washington. Admittedly, he's only a speechwriter, and so he's not really, in the heart of things. But Trump seemed to be exclusively. I mean, he had an opportunity to hire people like Steve Bannon, but Bannon was out in no time at all.
Douglas McGregor.
McGregor, exactly. Why didn't
even Tulsi Gabbard? I'm sorry, I'll
Tulsi
go out.
Gabbard, exactly. Exactly. There were many people that he could have hired. Stephen Cohen was alive for at least 2-3 years of the Trump term. He could have hired him as an advisor. Ron Paul he could have hired him. Could have even hired Pat Buchanan as a kind of a kitchen cabinet sort of advisor. He didn't do it. I mean, why would he think that if you had someone like John Bolton would implement your policy, or Elliot Abrams is going to implement your policy? It's a very strange thing, and the historians will have to really grapple with that question.
The story is that Trump likes to watch the 3 primetime shows every evening, and Bolton was on, like, who knows, probably Hannity or something like that, or Laura, and he said, "Who's that guy? I like him." Okay, and it's as simple as that.
I guess so. Yeah, I know. I'm sure that's right. But that's a very strange thing because look, Trump was a political neophyte, but after all, he's run a successful business for.
What about The Apprentice? That's all HR.
It's all HR, exactly. So you'd have thought, now this is a person who knows about hiring people. He's not just somebody who comes in, oh yeah, you'll hire him or hire them. I mean, he has to know a lot. I mean, you can't run a big successful business without knowing something about, hiring people. So it's strange that he kind of completely lost any interest in that one and was taken in like, oh, we'll have Bill Barr. And you think, well, Bill Barr, he's a Bush family guy. He's not gonna pursue your policies. John Bolton, he was in the Bush administration. He's not going to pursue your policies. And you think, well, how could he? I mean, just be so clueless about this. I mean, the idea of these swamp-like people that would pursue an anti-swamp policy. I don't know.
All right, are there any super chats that we can start wrapping this up?
Not too many. I think interesting questions, but I think we've been on for about an hour and a half. I think we. Do you have any closing thoughts, Peter?
Well, number one, I'm really thrilled to do this. It's a lot of fun. One thing that I've always liked is that questions are very, very good. And it means we have a good following. We have a good audience.
So just one question again from Marie-Kate Orga. Very interesting. There's several interesting questions. Marianne Williamson is doing amazingly honest interviews on YouTube. I'm surprised by her level of knowledge on current affairs. Would the Gaggle consider interviewing her? Would absolutely.
Absolutely. That is such an astute observation. I've been watching some of her interviews. She is very well prepared. She's actually a good interviewer. You know why? You get to hear the person that she's talking to. Right. This is an art that is has been lost. Right. I have to admit, I got played about her by the mainstream media. I completely admit it. But when I listened to her, she was on Rising before Crystal and Stugger moved over to Breaking Points. I think she's actually been on Breaking Points too. very, very interesting person to talk to. I didn't know anything about her until the primary, okay? But it seems to me that her profile as a thinker, an influencer, is only getting more and more impressive. So kudos to that.
Right. No, I absolutely. And just one also comment from Kevin Dorr, which is a very astute observation about Trump saying he hired Douglas McGregor at the end. Yeah. And then he says, I think he would have had a much better team if he had a second term. And I think I agree with that. And I think we were talking about that with Richard yesterday, that I think a second Trump term would have been different. I think he would have got rid of all of those neocons and bushes and swamp creatures and the Republican deadwood that he surrounded himself in this first term. And I think the second term probably would have been a much more productive and successful term.
It's all HR. It's always HR.
Absolutely.
If you don't have good people, you can't have good policy. It's simple as that.
Absolutely. If you hire someone who is not interested in your policy, he isn't going to implement your policy. He's just going to sabotage it from start to finish. And then Trump fired a lot of those people. And then what do? They all immediately bitched about him on the media.
The quintessential and James Jeffries, he openly, gleefully said, I lied to the president of the United States about the number of troops in Syria. He was proud of his deception.
Right. And then another suggestion from Reckless Abandon. I suggest you talk to Lucy Commissar about Bill Browder and the fake Magnitsky Act. And then plus Browder's connection to the Assange legal team. Lucy Commissar has written about that, is that there are these people that hold Doughty Street chambers. I mean, it's a very peculiar, the legal system in the UK is a little different from the one in the US. So when you have Doubt chambers, it's not like a law firm. I mean, people just come in with a case and then it's just handed to somebody. So it's not like a law firm like here we have partners, and so you say, oh, well, he's a partner and there's a partner and there's a conflict of interest. If you're just in chambers, they're all very different people pursuing very different agendas. So anyway, that's all I'm just saying is that I'm not wholly convinced that that the people who are working against Assange in his own law firm, but Lucy Commissar would certainly be a person that we could talk to about Browder and Magnitsky. All right, Peter, that was
first
very, very interesting. You've done it was a lot of fun. YouTube is really, really good. Let us hope that we will continue on YouTube. Buddy really enjoyed himself on YouTube.
He was sitting in a chair right next to me the whole time.
This is exactly. So, Buddy is an old-fashioned sort of YouTuber. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for your very good, very interesting comments and questions, suggestions. Thank you also for the super chats. Really super and very, very helpful to us.
And as we always end it, we're on locals. So go to the gaggle.locals.com. You just witnessed and supported our first super chat on YouTube. It was thrilling. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We have a store up, so you saw Buddy. If you want to mug with him, it's there, okay? And a tote bag and all kinds of stuff. All right. We've already done 3-4 Q&As. Questions are always very, very interesting. And the tip jar, well, the tip jar is the tip jar, and I don't have to explain how the tip jar works. So help us make it work.
Exactly, very, very important. Buddy, so how Buddy is. He needs his tips. He needs this to be fed.
He can hear you.
And so we'll bring our first live streaming to an end. We're going to do one very, very soon because we really enjoy ourselves.
We're going to try once a week. Once a week,
exactly. And remember, as always, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe.